Slave trade is one of the darkest chapters in human history, characterized by the exploitation of humans for economic gain. Slavery has evolved from ancient civilizations to the modern world, but it remains a global issue. This article explores the history, present-day manifestations, and potential future of the slave trade, analyzing its advantages and disadvantages, as well as its impact on societies around the world. The past. The historical slave trade. The historical slave trade, particularly the transatlantic slave trade, was a brutal system in which millions of Africans were forcibly taken from their homelands and transported to the Americas. This trade began in the 15th century and continued into the 19th century, driven by the need of European colonial powers for cheap labor to fuel their emerging economies. Advantages and disadvantages. From the perspective of the colonial powers, the slave trade was economically beneficial. It provided a steady supply of labor, enabling the growth of plants and the production of cash crops such as sugar, cotton, and tobacco. However, the economic benefits came at a huge human cost. Enslaved individuals suffered unimaginable horrors, including physical abuse, separation from family, and loss of freedom. The social fabric of African societies was torn apart, as communities were devastated by the loss of their people and cultural heritage. Impact on societies. The slave trade had a profound impact on both the African continent and the Americas. In Africa, the trade depopulated entire regions, hindered economic development, and fostered internal conflict as different groups sought to capture and sell their enemies. In the Americas, the introduction of large numbers of enslaved Africans created entrenched racial hierarchies and social divisions, the effects of which are still felt today. Present. Modern forms of slavery. While the transatlantic slave trade ended in the 19th century, slavery has not. Modern forms of slavery, including human trafficking, forced labor, and debt bondage, continue to exploit vulnerable groups around the world. According to the Global Slavery Index, more than 40 million people are currently living in modern slavery, the majority of them women and children. Advantages and disadvantages. For those who perpetuate modern slavery, the advantages are economic, just as they were in the past. Forced labor is often used in industries such as agriculture, construction, and manufacturing, where labor costs are minimized to maximize profits. However, the disadvantages are significantly negative. Victims of modern slavery suffer from serious human rights violations, including physical and psychological abuse, lack of freedom, and deprivation of basic needs. Impact on societies. The impact of modern slavery is far-reaching. It undermines the rule of law, fuels corruption, and hinders economic development. Societies where modern slavery is prevalent often suffer from high levels of inequality and social unrest. Moreover, the existence of modern slavery challenges the global commitment to human rights, exposing the gap between legal frameworks and actual implementation. The future, possible scenarios and implications. Looking ahead, the trajectory of the slave trade depends on global efforts to address its root causes and enforce anti-slavery laws. The future of slavery could take one of two paths. Either a continued struggle against ongoing forms of exploitation or a significant reduction in slavery through concerted global action. Advantages and disadvantages. If modern slavery persists, the benefits will continue to accrue to those who exploit vulnerable populations, while the disadvantages will deepen for victims and society as a whole. The continuation of slavery could lead to increased global inequality, economic instability, and social fragmentation. Conversely, the successful elimination of slavery would bring many benefits, including the strengthening of universal human rights, economic growth driven by fair labor practices, and more cohesive societies. Impact on societies. The future impact of the slave trade will depend on how effectively the global community combats it. A world free of slavery would likely see stronger economies, where all individuals can contribute to and benefit from economic growth. Socially, the elimination of slavery would lead to more inclusive and just societies, where human rights are respected and protected. Conversely, if slavery persists, the negative social impacts would continue to exacerbate global inequality and hinder social progress. Conclusion: the slave trade, in its historical and modern forms, has had a profound impact on societies around the world. While it has provided economic benefits to those who exploited it, the human cost has been devastating. The future of the slave trade depends on global efforts to combat it. Abolishing slavery is not only a moral imperative, it is also essential to creating a more just and equitable world. The continued existence of slavery will only perpetuate inequality, injustice, and social instability. As such, the global community has a responsibility to work tirelessly to eradicate all forms of slavery and ensure that future generations live in a world where freedom and human dignity are respected and protected.